Hey, what is going on, everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and welcome back to another episode of Mario's Minute. For those who do not know, this here is my second podcast I do. My main podcast, Mod Chat, is one I try and do at least once a month, in which I talk about things that I find new, interesting, cool, what have you, in the world of video game modding and video game console modding. However, this is not that. This here is Mario's Minute, my second podcast where I come on here monthly, sometimes with a guest, sometimes not. I try and alternate month to month, and I know I haven't been as consistent with it here this year, at least, hoping to get that to that next year. But this year, or this month, I guess, we are doing a solo episode here. But usually I come on here just by myself or with a guest at times, and I really just talk about whatever the hell I want to. It's kind of just like my outlet where I can just kind of come on here, fire up Audacity, and just talk for 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes longer, of course, if we have a guest on here, and really just kind of connect and talk with you all. So it's something that I have fun doing and been doing it here for several years at this point. But either way, in case you are wanting to consume more of Mario's Minute, you might be interested in this, it is available in two different forms. First of all, it is available in a video visual form here on the Mr. Mario 2011 YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey channels. Secondly, it is available like an actual podcast, so you can take it around and listen to it wherever the hell you want to, just like an actual podcast. Simply look up Mario's Minute on your favorite podcasting app, host, provider, or platform, and you should hopefully be able to find it. I know it's not available on all of them, but it is available on most of them. Either way, like I said, this is where I come on here, sometimes with a guest, sometimes not, and talk about whatever the hell I want to. And here, this episode finishing off 2024, so we're going to be dropping this here in December, close to the end of the year. It's just going to be a solo episode. I kind of hinted about that the last episode here, and again, like I said, I'm going to try and work to get some guests better next year at least. It's one of those things, it's just usually it's on me. I'm not really making up an excuse for it or anything. I'll get busy. It might be times where it might be a little like tight with my schedule and such, and sometimes I can only really record a video like right now, or like a recording right now at this exact moment, and just easier to do it myself. So that's kind of what I fall into. But again, at the end of the day, that's also, you know, my own responsibility and such. So hopefully you all can still enjoy this episode here. I kind of just have a bunch of random stories I was kind of want to share with you all here for this last episode, and I thought it would be a little bit of a good recap escape for, you know, everyone here talking about this. So first of all, I did want to talk about going to GameStop here recently. This year was actually last month, and you know, I'll say this, I've talked about it on episodes here, I've shared it on the channel, but I used to work at a video game store when I was in high school for about 2.5 years. So because of that, you know, I won't delve too far into it, but it really taught me a lot about like a first job, and especially working retail and everything. And really the big thing that I tell people is that it allowed me to have and give more patience for retail workers, service workers, things like that. So it's kind of one of those things. I have a pretty high threshold. So if I do get upset at a retail worker doing something, usually my threshold is a lot higher than the person who's going to be next to me. Because at that point, I'm kind of like, okay, dude, come on. Like, I understand, but like to an extent here. And I think that's a little bit of what happened here. By the way, I do want to say, just as a little bit of a heads up here, my apologies if there might be any like cuts or odd noises or something. I'm actually working through the end of a flu, which I had a pretty gnarly flu. I was incapacitated for a little bit. That was not fun, but I have mostly recovered. However, there's going to be some coughs and such here, so if there's anything like that, my apologies. But getting into this here, it was around Black Friday. It was during that week, and of course there were a few things I was looking for on sale. And I'll say this too, I ended up getting more than I expected on Black Friday, which is, you know, a whole entire month at this point now. But at the same time, there was just a small list of things that I was kind of thinking of getting. It was either stuff I really wanted or stuff that I was like, if I can find this, that's cool. If not, all good. And I was able to get everything on my list, which absolutely shocked me. So that was nice, at least. But one of the things that I was thinking of getting, which I had talked about in the previous episode, I believe, was Diablo 4. Now, in case you did not know, I talked about this a bit. My girlfriend and I, we were playing through Diablo 3 on Switch. We actually finished that, and it was super fun, but we were thinking of getting Diablo 4, which we ended up getting. And that's what happened with this GameStop, right? I ended up going there by myself, and I went there because they had Diablo 4 on sale for $20. Now, I think they were a little bit behind and such, and I feel like the person I was talking to was a newer and probably a seasonal employee. So I want to have a little bit of patience there, because I went in there, there wasn't anything that was really advertised as being on sale, and it was earlier in the week. And even so, I saw that they had Diablo 4, but it had the original like $70 price tag and sticker on it. There was nothing indicating that it was on sale. So the only way that it was verified it was on sale was really by the time I took it up to the counter and it was scanned by the POS there. By POS, it's like point of sale, not trying to insult anyone is what I mean, but the POS system itself. So what happened was I ended up going in there. I looked around a little bit. There was already 2 people in line, right? And I guess I'm sharing this because this is one of those times where it felt like every single thing that could have gone wrong with the transactions ended up going wrong. So I'll explain that there was one person there who was already in line. They were being served. There was another guy behind him, and then there was me. Now, I spent a few minutes looking around. I ended up grabbing Diablo 4, and I said, let me go ahead and get in line. And I ended up staying at the store for a long time, right, because of this. So there was one gentleman who was behind the counter, and he was handling the transactions and such there. Like I said, I think he was newer, but it also wouldn't surprise me if he was a seasonal employee who was there, which is understandable. Everyone has to get, their start somewhere. So what happened was, to my understanding, the first transaction, it was a guy who was buying a Switch OLED, and I believe he was getting some kind of bundle which came with some digital games. And the way GameStop does handle some of these digital purchases, or even all of them, is that when you purchase them digitally, you end up getting your code on the receipt itself. And I just realized that I think this has always been an issue in some way, not just like, they're not passing out like actual like proper postcard-esque type codes that you would get like inside of a can, like nicer quality, it's on receipt paper. But what I mean by that is I've even been a victim as well too of not getting a download code. Friends as well too. So, and this has been, I'm thinking of times from like over 10 years ago. So clearly the GameStop system to print out codes properly onto receipts still has flaws all these years later, right? But what happened was, I guess he was getting this bundle, which was a OLED with a few digital titles, and they tried to push the transaction through, and there was like 3 digital things he was supposed to get, and only 2 of them printed out. So they were confused there. The guy behind the counter, the cashier, he was still trying to get it working and everything, and I think they even tried to do the transaction again. So they did it another time, and it was still only 2 codes were printing. And I think they even tried to do it a third time, still only 2 codes were printing. So at one point, the cashier ends up calling another store, and they spent about 15-20 minutes walking this cashier through the process here. By the end, he felt pretty confident. He's like, okay, I think we got this. We're good. Thank you very much. We're all good here. They try and do it again. There's still 1 code missing on this transaction, right? And the guy who was there, who's waiting with the Switch, I don't blame him either, because, I mean, he was going there specifically for a bundle, and the issue was he was not getting something that he was paying for, which is completely understandable. So when they did this again, it still wasn't coming on, and you could just sense there was more and more tension, there was more frustration, the customer was getting more upset with this there. And then what happened was, I think the cashier, he was kind of trying to figure it out for like 5 more minutes or so, and then he said, okay, man, well, I'm sorry, I don't think we can do this. I don't think we can do the sale. I've tried everything. I'm not sure what the issue is, but I think the only thing that I can do is I can just, you could try and come back tomorrow and we can give this a shot. And the customer said, well, I came in here yesterday and they told me to come back in today. So here I am today. So I could sense his frustration there on that. So the cashier didn't know that. And then in the end, there was a little bit of I understand the flustering and such here, but there was just a little bit of a confusion because I think it had been, and granted, I just want to keep in mind too, this transaction had already been going on before I even stepped foot into the store. So with me still waiting, let's say this was about 20, 30 minutes later, right? So this has been going on for at minimum 20 or 30 minutes. So by the end, the cashier ended up saying, okay, well, I'm sorry, man. I I don't think we're able to do this here. So what I can do is I can just refund you and, just cancel this transaction, refund you. And the customer, he looked disappointed, but he said, okay, sure, I guess. Cashier asks, well, is it okay if we do it in cash? And the customer was saying, well, does it have to be in cash? And this is kind of the back and forth that happened, right? So the cashier says, well, no, we can put it on, we can refund your card, right? But there's no guarantee when you're going to get the money back on your card. So the customer's kind of like, wait, what? Cashier says, well, we can refund it, but it will take several days to do, and there's no guarantee. We can't guarantee it, so it might take like 2 days. It might take like 5 days to put the money back onto your card. But we can do it, but we can't guarantee when you'll get the money. And the customer just looked dumbfounded at that point, said, "What the hell does that mean?" And I almost stepped in, but then thankfully the cashier, he was able to, I could tell he was tired, he was flustered, and I knew exactly what he was trying to. Then I think he said the proper thing this time around. So the third time's a charm. He said, no, you will get your money. You'll still get your money. But it's just when we refund it on the card, we can do the refund, but then it depends on your bank. And your bank might give you the money in like a day or 2 days or 5 days, but we cannot guarantee that. So we can give you back the money, but by the time you actually get it, that's going to be up to your bank. We have no control over that. And then when it was explained that way, the customer said, oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, no, that's fine. No, I thought you were telling me that I wasn't going to get my money back. And even the second guy in line, he's like, oh, yeah, it sounded like you were saying like his money was going to go to the ether. And everyone was kind of laughing at this point. Everyone's guard is down. They're like, no, that's not it. That's not it. It's okay. No, it's just, it'll just take a few days. And the guy said, well, I guess if I don't have the money for a few days, that means I won't be tempted to come back and buy this. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and do the refund. And the cashier says, okay, man, I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, let's go ahead. We'll do the refund, right? So at this point, everything's all good, right? He's doing the refund. He presses all the buttons he needs to. Then you hear the cash register drawer open. And you just see the cashier's face drop. And he just bends over, puts his head down, and he just says, shit. I did the refund in cash. The laughing was me, not him, right? But I didn't even laugh at that moment there. I think all of us were just dumbfounded. Excuse me, the customer, you could just tell, was livid, but was trying to compose himself. I didn't take a look at the second guy, and I myself, I think I just had an exasperated sigh of just like, really, dude? Really? I don't know what happened at that point, but I feel like what happened was he was able to reverse it and redo it and get the money back on there. But by the time the transaction was over, you could tell the customer, he had left. He was just so frustrated, so furious because he had come out here a second time in 2 days. He doesn't have a Switch. He doesn't have his digital games. And now he temporarily doesn't have hundreds of dollars because this is not like a $20 thing. This was clearly, it was a Switch OLED and several digital things. He was paying hundreds of dollars for this. So he was upset. But by this time around, if you all are thinking we're done, we're not done here, right? By this time around, there was a manager who ended up coming in, right? Like right at the end of this. And now the second customer, it was their turn. And he was very nice. And he said, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry you were dealing with that. I am so sorry. I felt so bad that entire time. I could just see the first guy, he was getting more and more frustrated. And I felt so bad for you, man. I felt so bad. And the cashier really appreciated it. You could tell he was kind of trying to calm down. The manager was kind of there like, oh, what happened? I just came into the back here. And then she heard a little bit of like a summarized version of the story. And she essentially said, no, it's okay. It's okay. No, like you handled it all good. So good manager, right? I didn't pay too much attention to this second the second transaction, but I just remember it went on for longer than needed, right? Then by the time it was done, it was my turn, And the funny thing was, I had been in the store for so long, it was already like sprinkling a little bit when I was there. But by the time it was my turn, it was just a torrential downpour outside. So the person in front of me, he looked like he kind of just like, he was comfortable, right? But he kind of looked like he was just kind of rolled out of bed and came to GameStop in his comfortable clothes, because he was also wearing socks and slides. And he took one step out the door, came back in, and he's like, excuse me, I wanted to know, I need to run to my car real quick, and it's pouring. Would you all be offended if I took my socks off? Like if I took off my shoes and socks and I was barefoot for like 2 seconds just so I could run out of the store to the car? It was a very specific ask, and it was good on him, but the manager was just like, oh, no, that's fine, we understand, like, all good. He's like, okay, I just didn't want to, like, start taking my shoes and socks off, like, just as, and they're like, no, we get it, dude, just, it's okay, just, yeah, do what you need to. So that was nice of them, at least, but, you know, a little bit of an odd conundrum there. So at this point now it was my turn. And this is, again, you could tell the guy was newer and such there, because she was also explaining the process to him. So I was just there. I was buying one game. It was a physical copy. The manager ends up grabbing it, right? And she's like, you know, grabbing it in the back. And she said, hey, look, so you see how there's like 5 copies of Diablo back here? And funny enough, she also, even with this, she got the numbering wrong. She kept calling it Diablo 5, but she's like, oh, see, we got Diablo 5 right here. We got like 5 copies of Diablo 5 right here. So what you can do is, hey, look, pay attention. What you can do is, if someone brings up like an empty case like this, all you need to do is you just need to come back here. You grab one of the cases, and then you're able to sell them the game itself, and then you put the empty case back on the shelf. So, you know, he's understanding it, just like one of the basic things at GameStop there, how they handle their inventory. So what ends up happening is we're going through the transaction. It's still a little bit slow on there. And then in the end, we end up finishing the transaction. And it was something along the lines of, it was just like a little bit of an awkward air, because it all completes. And they're like, hey, so do you need a bag? Yes. Did you get your receipt? No. Do you want a receipt? Yes. I'm not kidding with those like awkward pauses and spaces. That's what was going on. So I just wanted a receipt, right? And what happened was the manager, she was really jovial and everything. She gave me a bag. She actually gave me a couple bags, because she gave me like one where I could like cover myself out in the rain, which I appreciated. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, we end up reusing these bags as well too, so I'll take them. So then the guy's confused because the receipt's not printing out. So he asks the manager, and the manager's like, oh, okay, we're out of receipt paper. Let me go to the back real quick. She goes to the back, like behind the store, right? Like the back room. She's there for a few minutes, comes back out, and she's like, I can't reach it. I can't get to it. What's going on? Oh, the receipt didn't print out. Oh, that's because it's out of receipt paper. You know, we're just going to pull it from this other one. So she ends up going to the other register that's unmanned, takes the receipt paper out of that one, swaps it into mine, goes in, reprints a receipt, gives it to me. So again, my transaction has already taken longer than it needed to. But then kind of to top it all off, right? I'm about to go. And then the manager, she saw this. She's like, wait, oh, hold on. Before you go, wait, which game did you give him? Oh, hold on. No, you're not supposed to give him this one. Here you go. Because it turns out when the game was being packed up, the cashier, the one who was newer, the seasonal one, like I said, I guess he ended up packing up the empty case, the one that goes on the shelf. But he didn't give me the game. So thankfully the manager noticed this and ended up giving the game right there. And at this point, this is something I very rarely do, because I usually just open up my games at home when I receive them. But the cellophane on it, it was a brand new game, but it was already like half ripped off. So before I even left, I was standing right there. I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and open it right here. So I ripped it open right there in the store, opened it up. Thank goodness the disc was in there. The DLC codes were in there. All that was there. So we were done at that point. But I guess that's all to say. Not only there's a little bit of a kind of tense, frustrating, but funny at the same time retail moment I can share with you all around the holidays. But at the same time, maybe you all can relish, laugh, appreciate the pain as well too. But also just remember that these things are going to happen, right? There are times where There are times where it seems like every single possible bad thing that could happen with a transaction is going to be happening there. But the thing I try and do is I just try to be patient, and usually it works itself out. But if you're looking to go to GameStop around the holidays, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that. So that's what ended up happening with that there. Now, this is also this here was something, another gaming related topic here that I wanted to discuss a little bit. And it was something I had thought of recently when I was fixing up a Joy-Con of mine. You see, several years ago, I ended up reshelling pretty much all the Joy-Cons I had at that point because I wanted, like the D-pads and all that stuff. And I had thought of this here, and I've given some recommendations before, essentially for a first hardware mod of some kind. And I kind of wanted to put this out there as a little bit of a recommendation, but even kind of seeing what you all think with this as well, too. Now, I had posted a bit about this, but years ago, I used to say that if you are looking to do like your first console hard mod, I still believe this, right? But I think one of the best things that you can do is get a Game Boy DMG and do a full reshell of this. Like do a full reshell, a full new display and everything. And I used to say that because when you do that, first of all, the Game Boy DMG, it's a workhorse, right? It's going to, that thing is nearly indestructible, right? I've seen systems that have been super corroded, not saying that it is indestructible, but I mean, we also have the one that was it was blown up during, like, it was in a bombing from the Gulf War, or a war, I don't remember which one exactly, I believe it was the Gulf War, and it is on display and still running Tetris, because even though it was in a bombing and it was melted and everything, it still works. So the Game Boy DMGs are incredibly resilient machines, is what I'm saying. But on top of that, it was also when electronics were more meant to be easier to get into and repaired. So it's easy enough to get into it. Any of the work you have to do, I mean, even though it's a handheld, everything is big on there. So even if you have to do cleaning, you can do that easily. Maintenance, you can do that easily. Unscrewing, screwing everything, getting everything where it needs to be. All that can be done quite easily, especially soldering as well too, because there is a speaker that you have to transpose onto a new board, and it's only 2 wires, that's it, and the pads are huge. So that's why I tell people, if you can successfully reshell a Game Boy DMG and clean it up and do the maintenance and everything, that gives you a really well-rounded approach to pretty much all of these steps that you would have to perform for modifying a console. And from there you can go and see, okay, I really like the soldering bits, I want to do more of that. Or I hate soldering, but I really like the screen upgrades here, I want to focus on that. I don't care about the screen, but I like the maintenance of it. So you can kind of see what your strengths and weaknesses are, what you like, what you dislike there. However, soldering still scares a lot of people, which is why I was kind of thinking of this as well too. But I've told people now, I think even though the Game Boy DMG is still great, I think if you're looking for, if there's somebody or even you yourself who's asking, hey, so I've done soft mods before, like I've soft modded the Wii, I've soft modded my PSP, I've soft modded the PS3, but I'm really wanting to do some hard mods, what would you recommend for a beginner? I think especially with the Switch still being a modern system, but being old enough where, the parts are readily available, plenty of people have Switches, some people have multiple Switches, multiple accessories, and also it's old enough that now that there are repairs that are being needed and such. I think doing a Joy-Con reshell, is similar to what I talked about with the Game Boy DMG, is a fantastic introduction into hardware modding. While it's not hardware modding a system, essentially thinking about it here, at least from my head here, the Switch, it's been readily available, so there's many people that have Switches. Many people who have Switches might have multiple pairs of Joy-Con controllers already, and the nice thing is, since it's still currently available and it's still all out there, you could either use your own hardware, you can pick up used hardware, you can, buy four parts of broken Joy-Cons, you can get another pair somewhere if you don't have them already. And then if anything does go wrong, the replacement parts are still readily pressed. They are still readily available on the aftermarket. It really just depends on how much you want to pay and how long you want to wait. If you don't want to pay that much, you can just order from China. If you do want to pay more because you don't want to wait, Amazon, local shops, they're going to have, things that you need at times. So that's pretty nice. But I say this because when you look at the Joy-Con controls, if you've never ripped into them, if you've never taken them apart, I'll put it like this. a lot of people look at them and think, oh, I can, reshell these easily. I could do the entire pair within 20 minutes in and out. And even experienced modders, experienced repair people who are really doing this day in, day out, who their skill set is much higher than mine. I'm not saying that they're going to say this is difficult or impossible, but the come away that they have is usually, I thought this was just going to be a quick in and out thing, but wow, I ended up spending an hour. I ended up spending an hour and a half. I spent 2 hours doing this here. It's not that it's difficult, but there's so much going on in these things that you really need to take your time on them. And with that, I agree. Now, with people who do these day in and day out, or they do them regularly, I have no doubt they could do a reshell within 20, 30 minutes, sure. But if you're not regularly doing this, or if you're doing it for the first time, you kind of need to set aside about 2 hours for repair, I say. Thankfully, you can get reshell kits, tool kits readily available. You do not need soldering skills unless something like goes wrong, like you rip something apart. I know for myself, there was one Joy-Con set. I think it might have been a battery or something. I think it was a battery. That was it. I ended up, I got a little confident and I ended up like ripping the wires off of it on accident. So I had to buy a replacement battery. I was able to swap it in and then that was fixed up. And that's what I mean by if something goes wrong. But the thing is it does teach you patience. It shows you like literally even how much you're supposed to screw in screws or unscrew them, what exactly you're supposed to feel, dealing with ribbons and locks and such on there, just dealing with very small sensitive components, and you truly get a feel for everything when you work on it there. So I feel like if you're looking to challenge yourself a bit for a first hard mod of some kind, but you're a little scared to work on a console here, reshelling a pair of Joy-Cons is great. If you don't want to reshell your own, you can try and look around, get like a broken set of Joy-Cons, for example, and try to repair those, see what you can do. But I truly believe if you can successfully reshell a pair of Joy-Cons, and by that I mean all the buttons are going to work, you got it, you don't have it over tightened, you don't have it under tightened, you don't have, things coming apart, you don't lose any screws in the process. If you can successfully do a pair from start to finish, that will really build up your confidence and your skill set for doing a hard mod of some kind. Now, if you're going to have to pick up a soldering iron, that is going to be something else that you do have to practice on, of course. But in terms of actually maintaining, opening, closing everything, unscrewing, rescrewing things back together, especially dealing with like little locks, ribbons, latches, things like that, the Joy-Con controllers, the big thing is with them, despite being small, they're really not difficult to work on, thankfully. But they do take patience, and they do take guidance, and that's what's important with this here. So that's my own recommendation. Let me know what your thoughts are on that as well, too. But, now here, let's see. We're going to talk about something safety related, right? How about that? Because I had talked about this recently as well too, at least like I'd post about it, talk about it with some friends and such. Now, I don't know about you all, but I'm one of those people when it comes to having a smoke alarm, a smoke detector, a CO2 detector of some kind. If I hear that chirp, which you all know exactly what I'm talking about, it's the one that goes off, every few minutes or so, the chirp that lets you know that the batteries are dying and that you need to replace them. I've always been one of those people, I cannot deal with that chirp. I simply cannot. What I do is if I hear it, I immediately go, I get a D battery. I think they're a D, or no, 9 volt. That's it. I get a 9 volt battery. I swap it in. If there's no 9 volt batteries available in the house, I leave the house right at that moment. I get batteries. I come back. I swap it in. And I've only done this one time. I've only done this once. But if I don't have batteries and it's too late at night, let's say it's like 1 a.m, which I don't necessarily recommend this, I'll just take that battery out, right? I'll take that battery out overnight, and then the next day I will go out and I'll get one, but I don't just let it linger there. And I think even when I did that as well too, I think I had another one that I ended up moving into that position or something. So it wasn't all too bad, but it was at least something where I was like, okay, could I go without this for the next 9 hours? I'm going to chance it and say yes. But that was my own risk that I took on there. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this is because, one, I mean, these things are important to test. They are, they're part of the security in where you live, right? And I just don't get it when people let that chirp go on for a while. And it will not just be a day or two, it will be for weeks or even months on end. And you can hear it in people's videos. You can hear it on their microphone if you're talking to them on the phone or a call or something like that. And the reason why I say this here is because recently we were doing a couple purchases where my girlfriend was finding a few things on Facebook Marketplace. So we were going around meeting up with people and such. And there was one apartment complex I went to, right? And I got out of the car, I had the cash, and I was waiting. And I was horrified when I was standing there in the parking lot and I could hear the chirp of one of these from an apartment. Now, I don't know which apartment it was. I'm going to assume that it was an occupied apartment. It wasn't just like an empty apartment. That's not what I'm thinking. But it was to the point where I'm just like, there's no way you can ignore this here for so long, or how do you tune out at this point? Because I'm not even in front. I'm outside. I'm waiting in the parking lot, and I can hear somebody's battery's dying, and this needs to be replaced. I just needed to walk door to door with a 9-volt. Like, hey, who needs a battery replaced? You're making the chirping? Okay, let's put this in, but I don't carry around 9 volts with me. But that's all to say, I don't know how that gets ignored. If you understand how it's ignored, if you're one of those people, maybe you can explain your logic, but if you are one of those people, I'm going to encourage you, please do not be that person. Seriously, do not. Keep a few 9 volts on hand. Make sure that you can swap those things out. It's just going to be so much better, because you'll probably realize as well, too, once you get rid of that chirping, it's like, oh, wow, you know, I tuned it out. I thought I was used to it, but this is actually nice not having the periodic chirp, you know, a few minutes. So that's my safety PSA, I guess we could say, right? We'll just go with that there. Now, let's see here. I think, you know, this is actually a story I'd wanted to share, funny enough, earlier this year. I was going to share this earlier this year, and I decided to not share it at the time for whatever reason. I think it was more just kind of like timing with the episode and such, and I didn't want to add like too much on there. And that's how it goes with some of these topics, right? But I did want to discuss something here and kind of share some, because it was around the holiday season, right? I don't think I've ever really told this story in detail, and this is going back to 2013, I want to say. So this is about an 11-year-old story, and it was happening around this time, right? November, December. So maybe this is just the time I'm thinking of. But once upon a time, before I had my first PS4, I am talking about the PS4, since it was 2013. Yeah, it sounds about right. Not the PS5, not the PS3, the PS4 specifically. Before I had my first PS4, I kind of had 3 PS4s. And let me explain that, right? Because some people might be thinking, oh, okay, were you just buying them, selling them? Absolutely not. That's actually not what happened, right? This is what ended up happening. So originally, when the PS4 was announced at E3 2013, I'd ended up I managed to pre-order a PS4. Now, at the time, thankfully, I was able to get a new system, but I was really only able to afford one system, which was going to be the Xbox One, which is what I was going to get, or the PS4, and this is going to be on launch, right? So since I was a lot more Xbox-centric at the time, I was looking forward to the Xbox One. I think I did pre-order the Xbox One, but then when all of that like TV stuff was going on, and the DRM and everything, and then Sony came out and they just said, hey, they still have that iconic video where they show how you can lend out games to your friends on PS4. And it's quite literally 2 of the executives where they just pass a game from one person to the other and say thanks. That's it. Sony capitalized on that beautifully, and it worked enough to me to the point where I truly believe this, but I said, you know, if Xbox is going to muck around, if they're just going to mess around and mess with us and do all this stuff, I'm not going to get the Xbox One. I'm not going to support this. I'm going to support with my own money. And if I don't agree with what Xbox is doing, I'm going to get a PS4. So I even announced, hey, I pre-ordered a PS4. And after a few days, Xbox ended up walking back their biggest and worst policies they had on the Xbox One. And sure enough, with that, I ended up actually canceling my PS4 pre-order, and I announced at the time I canceled my PS4 pre-order, and I went back and I pre-ordered the Xbox One. And my reason for doing that was I said, well, I did want the Xbox One, but I didn't like the policies they had. So I wanted to vote with my wallet. I liked Sony's policies, so I put my money in Sony's camp. But now that Xbox has really undid the things that I did not like about it, I'll go ahead and go with the Xbox One. And I'm not getting the PS4 yet, at least, because I can really only get one console at a time right now. And that's still what I feel about it, right? I feel like, really, if you don't like something, you got to vote with your wallet on there. But that was like during the summer around that time. But when we're talking about, I guess, closer to the holiday season and such, what ended up happening was around November, it ended up being Black Friday. So the first PS4, it was just, a pre-order online. And then I canceled it, all good. The second one I actually paid for in full. Now, what ended up happening was I remember at the time I was with some friends. We were going around doing Black Friday shopping. We went to we didn't go to Walmart, but we went to Best Buy. We went to Hastings, rest in peace to Hastings. We also went to GameStop. And I remember I had just purchased a Vita around that time, actually. It was on sale and it was within my budget, and I was like, I'm going to get this and I can justify it. And I was like playing it between classes and sometimes in class as well too, so that was great. But I ended up getting a Vita around that time, so I was really looking forward to getting re-upping my PS Plus membership for the games that they were digitally giving out, getting a few Vita games as well too. One of my best friends was with me. He also decided spontaneously to get a Vita. I think that was kind of my own influence on there. And I remember he told me at the time, he's like, yeah, look, I just know I've been working hard. I've been doing good in my classes, and I want something new, and it's affordable, and I feel like I've earned it. And I'm like, that's good. You do you, man. That's all good. But what happened was I remember, excuse me, I'd already had my Xbox One at the time. I was in line, and when I went there was a classmate of mine who I'd known for several years, who he was one of the first people in line. And it was funny because I even asked him, I was like, hey, what are you doing here? He was like, oh, I'm getting a PS4. And keep in mind that this guy, he had been so pessimistic about gaming. Super, super, super pessimistic to the max. So I was confused he was getting a PS4. He's like, yeah, I know, I've been pessimistic, but I feel like I want to get a PS4, so I'm getting one. So again, I was like, okay, man, you do you. I'm not going to judge. So he was one of the first people in line, which definitely guaranteed he was getting a PS4. So pretty much all the PS4s, all the Xbox Ones were already accounted for. That didn't matter with me because I was just getting my games and such. I was in line. You know how it goes. It takes a while to get it all. Then what happened was my friend ended up being one of the first people in line. Like I said, he wanted the PS4. He ended up getting maybe an extra accessory or two. He got a few games with it. He got a PS Plus card. It was going to be several $100s at that point, right? And when I looked over, I heard him, and he was talking to one of my friends who was with me. And he was like, hey, do you have any cash on you? Do you have any cash? Can I borrow some? I can get you back. And my friend's like, no, dude, I don't have any. What's going on? And he was like, dude, no, seriously, I can pay you back. And my friend's like, I don't have cash on me, man. I can't lend you anything. And I looked over at my classmate, right? And he was just giving this deer in the headlights look. And I could just tell there was something that was going real wrong. So I guess this is the second time we've talked about a GameStop transaction wrong. But this one was on him. It wasn't on the employees. So I had known him for several years, and I knew he was a trustworthy guy, thankfully. But I had asked, I was like, what's going on? He said, my card's not working. I don't have cash. My card's not working. So he was going to lose his PS4, and I'm just there. I'm like, okay, how much do you need? And he said, well, it's this much here. I was like, how soon can you pay me back? And he said, I can pay you back immediately. I can write you a check right now. GameStop doesn't take checks, but I have a check with me. I can write you a check right now. And I'm just like, okay, if you can pay me back immediately, I'll get you on this. So what happened was I wasn't trying to cut in live. I was like, excuse me. I go to the front of the line. I see it. Again, it's the PS4. It's with the accessories and everything. And I ended up swiping my card on that, right? But he even showed me, he was like, no, look, dude, I'm good for it. I have the money. It's in my account. It's just I don't have cash on me. My card's not working. And I have my checkbook right here. I can write you a check right now. And I said, well, thankfully, since my bank had mobile deposit for checks, I was able to do that there. So what happened was I ended up going up there. I paid for the PS4, even though I was the one who paid for it and everything. It was his, so he was able to get it. And I was like, well, I'm happy I could save your PS4. And then we went off to the side, and I was like, hey, man, could you write me the check? And he said, sure. I'm like, No, can you write it like right now? Because that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, and I'm doing this because I trust you on this. So I remember his hands were still like frozen from being outside almost. Like his hands were red. He kind of like bent over like awkwardly. He pulled out the check. He was writing it, and he even apologized. He's like, hey, I'm sorry, man. It might not look the best on here because my hands are still trying to warm up and everything. If there's an issue with it, let me know. I can write you another one. And right there, I was able to, scan it in the store. It seemed to go through with my bank and everything. And of course, it takes a few days to go through, but thankfully, it went through in the end. That was all good there. So he got his PS4. I was able to get my money back. At the end, I was like, I'm happy I was able to help out with this here. Give me a hug, man. And he gave me a hug, and he was on his way to get take his PS4 home. But that was the second PS4 I ended up getting, which was not mine. The third one here, this one, there was no money that was exchanged for, right? But this one was, it was funny timing, right? Around this time, this is when I was not working at the GameStop that I used to work at, but they used to periodically do some giveaways on their social media. And this, to my understanding, was the final giveaway that they did. They were going to be giving away a PlayStation 4 system. And all you had to do was you just had to like their Facebook page. I believe that's what it was. So as long as you liked it, you were already in. But there was also an additional bonus as well, too. They wanted to grow out the social media. So if you invited someone else, like if you had one of your friends, family members, coworkers, what have you, if you had someone like the Facebook page, they would have to submit your name. So they would get an entry, but you who invited them and had them like the page also got an entry. So I remember I was following this kind of closely, right? Because this giveaway was going on for, I want to say it was at least like 2 months or so. Like they were promoting it and everything. And there was one guy in particular. There was one guy who was so overly confident he was going to win the PS4. He was super overly confident about it. And the reason being is that not only he had liked the page for a while, but he was inviting so many people and having them like it as well too, that I swear, like by the time it got to the giveaway point, he had invited over half of he was responsible for over half of the people who liked the page liking that page. So he was even like celebrating early and everything. Like I'd see it on his like social media. He was saying like, yeah, no, since I'm going to win the PS4 because, it's really obvious I'm going to win it. And since like I'm definitely going to win it here, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and we're going to do this here and I'm going to get this. And, since I'm just going to get that, like, I know that I have to wait to get the PS4, but it's so obvious I'm going to be the one to win it, right? I'm going to be the one to win it. And he was so overly confident that they were going to win it. Now, I'm remembering this part, and it's been so long that I don't think anything can really be done from this front here. But the giveaway rules ended up changing at the end, which this guy was very upset by. But on top of that, I was also kind of like, I raised a little bit of an eyebrow. I'm like, okay, really? That's a little bit shysty. So, right, you got to realize this. You had about 2 months to not only like the page, but also get other entries in so you can recruit other people and stuff. But I want to say it was the last week of the giveaway. I want to say maybe even a few days before the system was being given away. It was really two things. It's like, one, you had to like the Facebook page, and two, you had to physically be in the store at the time they pulled your name. And if you were not there, you would lose your place and it would go to someone else, which is fair. But they ended up changing it so that you could essentially only have maximum 3 entries. So if you liked the page, then that's 1 entry into the giveaway. But if you invited other people, only 2 of them could count. So if you were like this person who ended up having hundreds of people like the page, all of that work was wiped away. So he went from having hundreds of entries to having 3 entries. And he was upset by it, right? Because he went from probably thinking he was going to win the PS4 to not being able to win it. And this is like months of just like constantly posting about it, sharing about it, talking about it, right? So he was understandably upset. And I want to say too, I think they probably like, put everyone's names like in a hat and pulled it out and such. But when the people, like when the shopkeepers were giving it away, they probably realized that as well too. They probably saw this guy's name popped up so many times that there was no way he wasn't going to win the system. But I always thought that was dirty because, like I said, you let this policy go on for months, and then right before you end up changing it right there. So again, this man went from hundreds of entries to 3 entries. That's what it was. The next part, though, I am happy I wasn't there for this, because essentially what happened was it was happening on a specific day where I was traveling that day. So I said, well, I can't be at the store, unfortunately, but you know what? I've already liked the page for years. My entry is there, whatever. I don't ever win anything, right? And this is a theme for me, right? Usually when it comes to giveaways and such, I don't enter in them because I never win. I really never win. But when it comes to things like this, that there could be times I'm already entered and I'm like, I'm not going to bother with this, right? There's no I'm going to win. I usually end up being the person who wins. I have missed out on this. I've missed out on a mini fridge. There's been other things in my life I've missed out on. So maybe I need to get a little bit better with that. And a little bit of a spoiler there. But essentially, I've been told what ended up happening was the day that I was not there, they decided to do the giveaway that night. Everybody who was interested ended up going to the store. They ended up pulling a name. And the first name that they pulled was my name. So I ended up winning a PlayStation 4. I didn't try to win it. I didn't do anything to win it. And on top of that, too, apparently it was the boss and his girlfriend at the time who are the ones who pulled it. And the story I was told was that when they saw my name, they got really excited. And they started, like, you know, saying my name, like, hey, is this guy here? Because they knew me. And nobody claimed it. And I wasn't there, so I couldn't claim it either. And apparently they were even like, they were disappointed because they're like, oh, what? He's not here. Oh, we really like him. Like, really? He won it and he's not here to pick it up? That's disappointing. We really like him. And they even thought a little bit too. I think even the girlfriend told me later on, she's like, no, we even considered, like, is there any way, can we just like hold on to it for him, please? He won the system. He's just not here, but there's no way. We have to give it to someone else. Okay, fine. So I can at least appreciate that sentiment, right? I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm happy they stuck to the rules. But at the same time, man, I'm going to tell you, because of the BS they pulled with that at the end, I told you, like, you know, kind of kneecapping the submissions and such there. I'm really happy at the same time, just with the way it looked. I was not there to pick it up, because I feel like it would have like shenanigans, because I've also shared and I had made it known that I wasn't working there at the time, but I had previously worked there before. So really, it kind of would have looked like one of those things of like, okay, this thing is being promoted for months, this giveaway is being promoted for months, and they change the terms at the end, and then when they give it away, they end up giving it to a former employee. You know what? They probably weren't even going to give this PS4 away to begin with in the first place. So that's kind of what I was thinking there, and that's why from that regard, I was happy that I was not there to pick it up, because I was also like, you know what, I'm going to eventually get a PS4. It's fine. But man, if I could have gotten a free one, that would have been cool. Eventually, I did end up getting mine, right? Which I don't think I've told this story either. So those were the 3 PS4s that, you know, one of them I canceled. The other one I did pay for, but it wasn't for me. And the third one I won, but I couldn't pick up. So the 4th PS4 was the one that I finally ended up getting, right? And I don't think I've ever shared this story here, but I'll share it because, you know what? 'Tis the season, it's funny, whatever it might be. I ended up getting that PS4 actually right after my vacation, because like I said, I went off for vacation. I came back. The night I came back, for some reason, I felt like playing Call of Duty Ghosts, which is not a good game. I tried it on the 360. I tried it on PS3, and I said, you know what? Maybe I just need to try like the current generation version of it, right? I don't really feel like buying it, so where can I rent it? Because at the time it was 2013. I think the very beginning of 2014. I think this is the very beginning, like January 2014. So I was looking around. I'm like, well, Redbox doesn't have it. This place wouldn't have it. Blockbuster's dead now. I guess there's another place. I guess there's Hastings. They're still around, so I can go there. I guess that I can rent it, right? So I had the Xbox One at home. Literally the night I came back home, right? After like a couple hours being settled and such, I got in my car. I drove down to Hastings. And I look around. And they had like 3 copies of Call of Duty Ghosts on Xbox One, but none of them were in stock. And then I start looking, right? I'm just like, well, is there something else? Maybe I want to buy, maybe I want to pick up, whatever it is. And I had to do like a double, triple, quadruple take, because all of a sudden I walk by and I see a PS4 box. Now keep in mind, aside from like the times where, like, for example, I was at that GameStop and I got one for my classmate there, like I picked his up, I had never seen a PS4 in the box available for sale right there. So I was looking and I was like, I can actually justify the purchase now. But I was just trying to rent a game, man. That was it. So I ended up, I looked like a lion, I'm sure, because this thing was behind a cage, and I paced up and down the aisle for about 15 minutes, kind of like looking down, looking at the PS4, looking down, thinking, looking at my phone, looking at the PS4, just thinking about it, right? Because the other thing that was going through my head was, you got to realize at the time, it wasn't as bad as the PS5, but the PS4 was so hard to find. It was incredibly hard to find. That was the first one I had seen, like I said, outside of the launch context. And I knew that if I didn't pick that one up there, because I was also thinking, I could use it to have a better comparison of Xbox One versus PS4. I was thinking about the channel as well, too, admittedly. I was like, well, I can actually cover PS4 stuff on the channel now. I can talk about it at a level because I actually have the system. I'm not just speculating here. I can do direct comparisons. I can do captures. It's actually beneficial for what I'm doing here with you all. So because of that, I had gone back and forth, and I said, it looks like all the stars are aligned. And honestly, if I don't pick this up now, I think it's going to be several months before I have the opportunity to pick one up, because I'm not going to buy a scalped one. So I remember I ended up picking it up, right? And I didn't want to buy a game. I already had some games on PlayStation Plus. I had no intention of buying a game, but I still ended up renting one, which ended up being Knack, which my opinion of it was not great. I needed something to try out the PS4 to see what I was missing there. And it was a good game to waste your time and do something else on the side. Pretty much what I did was I had podcasts that were running on the side while I was like half playing Knack. And that was enjoyable. That was my opinion of it essentially. But what ended up happening was I ended up going up to the front counter. And again, it was behind the cage. So I said, hey, I'd like to pick up that PS4. And the guy looks at me and busts out laughing. And I was kind of confused, and he was like, look, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm not laughing at you. It's just, I'm not kidding. We just got those 2 PS4s in. Well, actually, wait, we don't have 2. We just have 1. We just got 2 PS4s in, right? I just sold one like 20 minutes ago, and you're buying the other one just now. And I was like, oh, I'd still like to get. He's like, oh, yes. Yeah, no, I'll sell it to you. It's funny because we're selling both of them within like 20, 30 minutes. So he went out there, he gets it out of the cage. I ended up getting my copy of Knack right there. And the funny thing was, too, you got to realize this is how it was, right, to get a hold of a PS4 at the time. This store didn't even get it from their distributor. If I remember correctly, the guy even ended up telling me that they had to go to Best Buy, and they bought 2 PS4s from Best Buy and brought them over to their store just so they could stock them and sell them. So even they had to pay MSRP for the PS4, and they didn't make any money from my sale, is what that means. The only money they were making was from the rental, but from the PS4, no, that was just cash in, cash out, cash in. That's all it was. So that was finally when I ended up getting my PS4. And lo and behold, I took it home, I unboxed it, I hooked it up, and I remember the very first video I recorded was after about 10 minutes of playing it, because I didn't realize how loud that system was going to be. It was screaming loud. And I just realized that was just how the PS4 was. So there we go. I'd say that's how it's been there. Now, I do want to kind of, wind down this part of the podcast here since we're close to the end. So one thing I do talk about is the games I'm currently playing. And let me do that before I get some water real quick. Well, let me get some water first, what I'm saying. Okay, excellent. So, there's been a few games I've been playing here. Ring Fit, as you all know, I still talk about this. I still play it. I'd even said in one of my year-end videos here, expect me to still be talking about it when the Switch 2 comes out, unless they release a proper successor to this game, because the Switch 2 is going to be backwards compatible, and this is how I get my workout. Between dog walking and doing this here and just eating right, I don't need to go to the gym, thankfully. I haven't been in several years. It was really stopped going because of COVID, and then I started doing Ring Fit, and then after months and months of diligently doing Ring Fit, I was like, I actually don't need to go. I don't need this gym membership. So Ring Fit has been great for that. The only downside, I will say, has been one, I've kind of been playing it because recently I have been able to, just because of, flu I've been recovering from. So I hope to get to that here soon again. But the other thing as well, too, is the, excuse me, the ring cons. I have now bent 2 out of shape. The first one I got, it's pretty bent, right? The second one, it's starting to get bent enough where it's not as reliable. So I really wish there was a better way of getting like non-proprietary ones on there. And funny enough, I was actually going to take I had this planned, right? I actually ended up buying a separate like third party, not a ring con, but one of those like Pilates exercise rings, because I was hoping and thinking that you could just take the electronic guts from the ring con itself that's like at the top of it and swap it over to another resistance band or resistance ring. I guess that's what it is. Turns out that's not the case. Pretty much you can get the plastics off, but then when you get to it, the plastics have a little circuit board inside of them that is soldered to a sensor or a few sensors that are then epoxied onto the ring, which has been cut, and there is like a metal brace right there almost. And just the way I looked at it, I was like, I might be able to make this work if I have a Dremel and I like Dremel this off and then modify the new ring and put it on there. But honestly, it's just so much work at that point, and there's so many margins of error and breakage there that I said, unfortunately, this was a nice pipe dream, but I just got to put this one away. And I'm just going to buy a whole new ring at this point, which works out because my girlfriend actually ended up finding a listing for the complete kit for $30. It was the box, which is ripped up a bit, but a new ring con, a new leg strap, and the game itself. And apparently it is used technically, but the seller has said they only used it a handful of times, so it's pretty much like new. So the downside is, it's just... the hardware itself is exclusive and it's proprietary enough that if your if your ring con starts going out, you just got to get another ring con. And I know that Nintendo is not going to be producing those for the end of time. So we'll see. I do hope that we get like an upgraded Ring Fit Adventure or like a Ring Fit Adventure 2, because it's truly one of the best pieces of software and games that I have played, and it does have a really positive impact. And I'll say this, if it really wasn't that great, if it wasn't working for me, I wouldn't continue to play it. I wouldn't have gotten, a second ring con. I wouldn't be getting a third one here. So it's getting to the point where I'm starting to defeat Ring Fit at this point. Diablo 3, I had talked about this. We ended up finishing this game. Now we were able to play through all 5 acts because, Act 5 has Reaper of Souls there. That's the expansion. But we definitely enjoy this. We have been wanting to play Diablo 4. I have it installed, but we just haven't even fired it up at this point. But that was a really fun one that both my girlfriend and I absolutely enjoyed. Another game I've been playing here has been Amiyo, which this one was funny. I'm just a few chapters into it, right? And it is a visual novel, essentially, but it's a detective mystery as well, too. Because this was the game that had like a 15-second announcement, right? It was a Nintendo first-party game. It was during one of the Nintendo Directs, and it was just like a 15-second teaser of a guy in a trench coat with a like hand-drawn like smiley face on a paper bag that was covering his head. Really creepy, really atmospheric, and the big thing was it was rated M. And people were so hyped for this game, right? They were so hyped for it because they're just like, oh, yo, Nintendo's making an M-rated game. Nintendo, they're making an M-rated game. This is awesome. Are we going to get like another like Eternal Darkness type game? What are we getting? What's going on? Then it ends up being the third game in the Detective Famicom Club, I want to say. Famicom Detective Club. I end up mixing that up there. It ended up being the third game in the series on the Switch, and it ended up being essentially kind of like a murder mystery visual novel. And so much interest dropped off of it, right? So many people were upset by this. Meanwhile, I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. The only thing I was disappointed, though, with was for myself. I was like, well, there's 2 other Famicom Detective Club games that are out on the Switch, and I haven't played either of them. I've been wanting to. I've kind of trying to been hold off for a physical release, but at this point, unfortunately, I don't think a physical release is going to happen. It's just been years at this point. So I'm like, so if I buy them, I have to get them digital is the thing, and I don't know if I have to play those 2 in order to play Emio, but I really want to play Emio. But I was personally excited about it, right? I ended up getting it earlier this year, and I started playing through it, and so far it's good. I will say it wasn't as, I guess from the presentation and such, it wasn't as like dark and gritty as I was expecting. And from what I've seen people share, that seems to be something that I guess people were conflicted on, right? Because people who've played it absolutely love it. They kept their opinions open, they jumped into it, they really loved it. But there's been other people who have not liked it because even they gave it a shot and they kind of just rushed through it, didn't really give it a chance, and it wasn't like a scary game. Like it's not even something like Deathmark or NG, like the Spirit Hunter series, for example. Those are also murder mystery type visual novel games, but they are spooky. Like I played the first one in my basement in the dark on PS4. That was such a big mistake because it was terrifying playing through that, but it doesn't me not that. However, the things I do like when I was playing through it, I love the interface, I love the setup, I love it's not in English, but they have Japanese voice acting, which you can disable on there. The character models look great, the movements, everything there looks great, which seems to be kind of silly in my opinion for talking about with a visual novel, but you got to realize as well too, this is a visual novel with some actual like really good backing on it, like in terms of funding and such, because this is Nintendo making a visual novel. And when you're looking at something for hours and hours on end and you're doing a lot of reading, having things that are dynamic on screen and having the UI that's accessible and such and everything there, as opposed to just things just staying static and not moving around as much, it's really nice having that. It's one of those things you don't really realize and value until you've played through several visual novels and you see, wow, the ones where they're a lot more dynamic, there's more going on screen. It's not like I need an action game, but if there's stuff actually happening, I do pay more attention. It's less tedious in a way there, as opposed to just showing like static images and going through like a storybook almost in a way. So I do like that. And my takeaway from there was, if Nintendo could fund and develop more visual novels, it would really increase the production value of them and just make them more fun to play through, in my opinion. Although I already like them, don't get me wrong, but really if you've got that Nintendo money, there's so much more that you can do to enhance the reading experience on there, is what I'm saying. And then the last game I was playing a little bit of, which this is something that I've been jumping into, like I've tried to jump into a few times, but I haven't really given it the proper time, and just like now doing the same thing. The Atari 50th anniversary collection, that was it. I ended up getting it about a year or two ago, and I was playing through it and it was cool, but I think at the time it was just, there was a lot of, funny enough, there was just a lot of reading and I wasn't really wanting to get into it at that exact moment. It just wasn't the type of game for me. But recently I was trying it out again, and I felt like this is the right time to do it. And I was going through it and I was reading, and it's so cool how they covered this here, because essentially I'm playing it on Switch. It's like having a full Atari museum in a cartridge. That's how it feels like. The promotional materials that are on there, the videos, the interviews, the games that you can play, that you can actually interact with, that have kind of been remastered of sorts from the beginning, learning the lineage of this. It's incredible. It's probably the best museum collection like that I've played. And I think maybe the only thing I've played that's been sort of similar to that was back on the PlayStation 1 with the Namco Museum games. Now, I think I only have 1 and 3 on there, but the cool thing is it was the same thing where it's like a first-person type game, and you're going through and you can learn a little bit about each game, and then you're able to play the games that are on those collections, such as Miss Pac-Man or regular Pac-Man or Galaga, whatever it might be on there. And that's maybe the closest I got, but this is like that, except it... Not dissing Namco Museum, right? Namco Museum was awesome for the time, But this feels like a real, like a big step up. Like this is like, hey, Namco Museum, you're kind of like the prototype. You're setting it up right there. But this is what a real digital video game museum should be like. And your entrance fee is just purchasing the game. That's it. It's awesome. If you are interested in video games, history, you like museums, this is great. And I will say, take your time on it as well, too. Now, I'm not playing it right now. And the reason why I'm not playing it right now is actually because my girlfriend and I are going to play through this together. Because when I was playing through this here, this is stuff like her and I have talked about, or like I've shared with her and such. And I was playing a little bit of it by myself. I was like, you know, I think she would really appreciate this, because I think this is like just the right amount of history, of learning, of getting new insight, uncovering new stories on old topics, getting clarification on there, and being able to play something, because a lot of the games, at least at the beginning, the ones that I'm trying, a lot of them do have multiplayer ability on there. So I asked if she'd want to play it together. She's like, dude, that sounds awesome. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, we're actually going to go through that together. So I'm very much looking forward to that, but that's why that one is kind of on pause right there. So we're getting close to the end of the, let's see, we're getting close to the end of this here, right? And I did want to talk about one game store story. Let's talk about this, right? And then we'll go ahead and finish off this episode. So I'm going to tell the story of a Wii and how I didn't, because of this, I actually hated the Wii for a bit. And I even swore I would not have a Wii, and clearly I ended up violating that because I ended up getting a Wii later on. But this is about a friend we had at the store who would come in. He was a regular, and I would consider not just like a customer. I would consider him like an actual friend, you know. I have his number and everything. We've talked here and there, so it was all that. So what happened was he would come in. He was the type of person, real chill guy, but he would come in, and sometimes he would just stay and talk with us for hours. And I will say most game store employees dislike that. But this guy was a friend, right? We were cool with him. We liked him. So it was all good. But what happened was there was one time he came in and he was like, hey, man, I was wondering if you guys could help me out. I'm looking for a Wii. Because I guess him and his girlfriend lived together at the time. And he was looking for a Wii so she could play the new Super Mario Bros. Game. I think it was like literally called New Super Mario Bros. And it was on the Wii. I believe that's what it was. But we said, well, we don't have one here. And then we were kind of thinking about it, and I was like, wait a minute, what about the one we have in the back? And that sounds really ominous, right? But you got to rewind a little bit. This was maybe 3-4 months prior to this event happening. In the back, we ended up having a shelf that was full of miscellaneous peripherals, electronics, controllers mostly, things like that. And in the corner of that shelf, there was a Wii right there. And I had looked through this shelf several times because there was a lot of like hidden little things I found there. Like I was able to get controllers there for cheap. Like there was one time I was wanting a extra Xbox 360 controller. I found one. I was able to piece it together because I didn't have a controller back on it, and I was able to put it there. And once I pieced it together, I asked my manager about it, and he was like, yeah, you can buy, is $15 okay? And $15 for a good condition Xbox 360 controller at the time was fantastic, especially because it was wireless. So I was kind of looking through that area for things for myself, but also for things we could sell in the store. I found a few games that were still working in great shape, but they had like a few imperfections on them, so we couldn't sell them. So there were times I got either really cheap or free games from there. The biggest one, though, was I ended up finding a complete in-box mint copy of Persona 2 Eternal Darkness. I want to say that's what it is. Let me see. Persona 2 PS1 Eternal Punishment. That's it. I don't even know. Let's see how much this is going for, right? Okay, so I'm looking on eBay right now. To buy this complete in box, like good shape and everything, it's at minimum $300 that I'm seeing. At the time, I want to say we were putting it up for $100 or $150. So that just shows how much it goes up there. But I remember at the time I found it and I looked it up and I saw it and I approached my manager. I was like, hey, dude, is there something wrong with this game? No. It's complete, right? Yeah. It's ours? Yeah. To sell? Yeah. So why is it in the back here? He's like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, dude, this is like a $100, $150 game. And he was surprised too. He's like, okay, man, I mean, if it's that rare game, go ahead, price it, label it, put it out. Wait, don't put it out there. Let's put it behind the glass because it's a rare game. And I was like, you're right, I'll do that. So just little stuff like that. And it always got attention from people too, because people would look down and be like, what, a PS1 game is that much? So that's usually what happened there. Either way, going back to this though, I ended up finding a Wii in the corner, and I wasn't interested in the Wii at the time, but this thing, it had scratches all over it. It was not in great shape. It had all of these, like I think the memory card and GameCube ports and such, the tops for it, like the covers, weren't there. So it was in bad shape, right? And, excuse me, I remember what happened was I asked about it, and my manager didn't know anything about it. So we hooked it up, and it turned out the system was modded. And then he was like, oh, that's why we couldn't sell it. Yeah, it was modded. Yeah, we can't sell a modded system. So we just kept it in the back. But because this guy was our friend, now fast forward a few months, my manager brought that up, and he's like, wait a minute, don't we have that system in the back? And I said, yeah, but it's modded, right? So we can't sell it. And he's like, well, I mean, this guy's cool, you know, like, hey, you, like, are you interested? We're asking our friends. He's like, we do have one Wii, but it's not in good shape, and it is modded, so, like, is that okay? And he asked, well, does it work? And we said yes. And he was like, okay, I mean, if it's modded, that's even better. I don't really see the downside to it. So we pulled the Wii out, right? We showed him the condition. It was not in great shape. And he's like, that's fine. Can it play games? And we found a power supply. We found a sensor bar. We found a couple nunchucks, a couple Wiimotes. We had all the accessories, the cables as well, too. We hooked it up. He sees it. It's themed. It has all this stuff already installed on it. And he's like, oh, wow, that's cool. Okay, so, I mean, if it works like that, that's good. I just need it to work. But like if it's modded, that's even better. Does it play games? And we took a disc, we popped it in, it loaded up. He's like, perfect. Yeah. How much for it? I don't remember the price we gave him, but we definitely gave him a good discount on it. I'll say that we gave him a good discount because really he was doing us a favor at that point because we couldn't sell that as a normal system. So he was really happy, right? He ended up getting the Mario game. He got the Wii. He got all the accessories. He's a happy camper. He goes back home, right? About a week later, he came back and he said, hey, so yeah, I'm bringing the Wii back. Or I didn't want to return it, but, you know, there was an issue here. We asked what's going on. He said, well, the problem is I put the disc in, like the Mario game, but it's making me update the system. And I knew about this because this is actually one of the few times Nintendo was actually transparent about it. There were a few updates for the Wii where if you tried to update, it actually gave you a warning. And even Nintendo separately, like on their websites, they said this, but essentially the warning would tell you if your system has been modified, there's a chance that when you run this update, it could brick your system. They didn't say the term brick, but it was essentially like, you know, it could like render it inoperational, something. And it was happening as well too. There were people, they had their systems fully modified. They bought a new game, like I think it was like Mario Party 9 or something. They'd pop the disc in, they'd run the update. When the system would reboot, it was bricked. That was it. And it was because it was modded. So the thing to do at the time was you had to unmod the system, then update it, then you could remod it on the latest update if and when there was an exploit available, which now at this point, that's irrelevant. You can modify the latest firmware across every single model of the Wii. So at the time, I didn't know how to unmod it, but essentially he came back, he said, yeah, I still want the Wii, but the problem is I can't play the one game that I want to play on it because if I update it, there's a chance I'm going to brick it. And I was like, no, I've read about this. I know what you're talking about. Yes, there's a very high chance you are going to brick your system if you run that update. So as a favor, he was like, hey, if I bring this back, like, could you all remove the update? My manager had no idea what to do. And it wasn't the update, it was the mod. And I said, okay, sure, but I don't have a Wii, so can you bring like all the accessories and stuff? And he brought it in a box, he brought it over, and I took it home, right? And I spent so much time. I spent almost all night working on this, right? And I was complaining about it. And then one of my best friends ended up calling me, who was more into the Wii modding stuff. And he was able to guide me through it a bit and give me a few links and all that stuff, because it was from what I remember, it was a very convoluted process. And even just going through the process of going and wiping the system, that was not enough. And I knew that, which is why I did not do it. I don't remember what apps I used. I don't remember what options I tried out. I do not remember. But I do remember for sure I was able to fully unmod the system, which was painful to do. I was then able to run the latest update on it successfully, and then I was able to pop in his game, and it worked. So when that was all done, I ended up putting it all back together. I didn't have to take it apart, but I put everything back together, unhooked it from my TV, took it from my house back to the shop for my next shift, and we call him up. I let him know, yep, your system unfortunately has been unmodded. It is now updated and it's playing the game. He's like, oh my, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So he came in, he picked it up, he left. That's not the end of the story. So I spent all that time learning, doing that, everything. It was incredibly frustrating, right? Within a week or two, he came back with the same box that I put the Wii in to sell it back to us. Because the story goes, him and his girlfriend had broken up, and because he bought the Wii and the Mario game exclusively for her, he no longer had a reason for the Wii or the Mario game. So to my understanding, I don't even think the game was played. I don't even think he hooked up the Wii again. But because they had broken up, he immediately took the Wii, took the game, brought it back to us, and sold it back to us. And I was just fuming at that point. I'm not going to lie. Now, that's his own thing. That's his own thing he could do, right? His own property, whatever. That's all good. He technically didn't do anything wrong. But I will say maybe the only regret that I have from that situation is channeling what the Joker once said. If you're good at something, never do it for free. And I think maybe my only regret there, which could have softened the blow, is I really should have said, I did this because it was my first job. And you know your first job, you love it and you want to put your all in and you want to show your dedication to the store and everything. At least that's how my work ethic is, right? I was just trying to do it as a favor to him, a favor to the store, all that. But my one regret there is I should have been paid for my time. I shouldn't have volunteered my time, especially because I wasn't working for volunteer work. I wasn't doing a volunteer effort. I was an employee. I was getting paid there. And I should have just said, even if it was directly through this guy, I should have said, yeah, I'll unmod it. I'll take it home. I'll unmod it for you. I'll make sure it works for a price. And especially because I was in high school, it could have helped out. But because of that whole experience, I was so sour on the Wii for years, and I really never thought I would ever get one. And then I did. Which, to be honest, the first Wii I got it for my brothers. And I will say, with all the time, all the effort, everything they've done, the fun times they had on it, it's probably the best return on investment purchase for a console that I've done in terms of a little bit of money being spent for a whole lot of enjoyment. So I don't regret doing that, at least. Now, this episode has gone on a little longer than expected just because, well, it was story-packed. And, you know, when you're having fun, things seem to just fly by like that. I guess we can say that. But either way on here, we are at the end of this episode. And this here is going to be the final episode for 2024. So I will see you all next month, and we'll see what we're going to be doing next month. But if you have not made it to the end of one of these episodes, what I like to do is I like to pick a keyword or a key phrase. And if you use this keyword or key phrase in a comment on the video upload, I'll know that you made it to the end. Now, typically I do pick up something off my desk, but I actually wanted to talk about something that I'm seeing on my screen here. And how about the word wave? And it could be W-A-V-E or W-A-V. Do you record in WAV format when you rip CDs? Do you rip them in WAV format and then convert them to something else like FLAC or MP3 or what have you? Do you ride waves when you go surfing? Have you tried surfing on waves? Let me know. And I'll actually finish this episode with this here, right? I hope you all have a great holiday season, whatever you're going to be celebrating, or choose not to celebrate, whatever it is. I hope you all have a great new year, and I hope you all have a safe time with all this as well, too. And for all you listening, I hope you all stay safe enough and enjoy yourselves enough that you'll be here for another episode in the future. Because I do legitimately want, you know, my listeners and everyone else to be safe out there, or inside, wherever you are. But this is something that was interesting that I'd never really thought of until, you know, this was shared. I can't remember who, but there was someone I think they tweeted about this, and they said that MKBHD told them this, and it blew their mind, and they never forgot it. A WAV file is not a variable bitrate. It is a static bitrate, and
whenever you record it, it's just, you're using the full amount of data and storage that you can use, right? So you just got to think about it like this. Typically, if you're going to be comparing like MP3 files, for example, especially if they're variable bitrate, one file that has more going on it, or even it's a longer file, is going to be a bigger file size than a shorter one, or music that's not going to be, you know, as intensive or such. I think that's easy to visualize, right? But when it comes to WAV file formats, if you record a band pouring their heart out and playing a full set, right, for an hour, but at the same time, if you record an hour of silence in WAV format, the band playing their music, that recording is going to be the exact same file size as the 1 hour of silence, if you record exactly 1 hour on each of them. So that's just some food for thought, and something that you've probably never realized or thought of, but then when you think of it, it's like, that makes sense, but wow, that's a little bit mind-blowing. But that makes sense, but wow. That's probably that was my thought process, at least. Either way, that is about it for this episode of Mario's Minute. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves listening, watching, tuning in, and I really appreciate you all tuning in. Again, happy holidays, safe holidays to you all, and a happy new year to everyone. So this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for watching and listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this video and this episode, a like would absolutely be appreciated. If you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well, too. But again, as I always say, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for listening and watching, everyone. And until next year.